James Maddox had lived in plenty of places, some with war zones outside the wire, others with cubicle battles inside the office. But he never imagined the fiercest fight he'd face would be in his own front yard against an HOA. With a clipboard and an axe to grind. It started with a ramp. Lucy's wheelchair ramp wasn't fancy. It was functional solid wood, well-maintained, and painted a soft gray to match the siding of their home in Westbrook Pines. James had built it himself after the accident, the kind of project that distracted him from the helplessness he'd felt in that hospital room. But one morning, James stepped out with Lucy for their usual morning sidewalk sketch session and froze. The ramp was gone. Just gone. Screws, bolts, and a few splinters remained. Lucy stared at the empty space in confusion. Her sketchpad slid from her lap. James didn't say a word. His fists clenched so tight, his coffee mug cracked in his hand. He carried Lucy down the stairs gently, like she was made of porcelain, then turned back to the porch with a cold calmness in his eyes. There was no note, no warning, just the cold morning air and the subtle sound of sprinklers ticking on across the neighborhood. Neighbors peeked through blinds. One even walked by with a labradoodle, offering James a quick nod of sympathy, but no one said a word until his phone buzzed. "This is Karen Delacroix with the HOA. The unauthorized structure has been removed. Your home must maintain uniformity with community standards. You may request a hearing if you disagree." James stared at the message. Unauthorized structure. That ramp was Lucy's only independence. He knew Karen. Everyone in Westbrook Pines did. Blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, drove a Lexus, and walked like she owned the place. She wasn't even the HOA president, just the vice, but she wielded her title like a badge, and her clipboard like a sword. James walked inside, his jaw tight. Lucy sat quietly, clutching her pencil. She didn't ask why her ramp was gone. She just asked if they could still draw sidewalk chalk dragons tomorrow. He nodded. But he wasn't thinking about chalk. He was thinking about hammers. He was thinking about how far someone had to go to remove a child's ramp in the night, and what kind of person called that community maintenance. That night, James pulled out his old army notepad and started writing dates, messages, names. He'd fought for injured comrades overseas. He wasn't about to back down here. And he had a plan. Not one for revenge, but one for justice. But the real twist came the next week when Karen did something far worse than removing a ramp. She hurt Lucy. Not metaphorically. Not emotionally. Physically. And that's when the story stopped being about an HOA and started becoming a courtroom battle with no escape. James had kept calm for Lucy's sake. He'd filed the first complaint with the HOA, documented everything, even emailed the city inspector with photos of the removed ramp. But nobody wanted to get involved. Not when Karen Delacroix's name was on the other end of the clipboard. The ramp was gone, but James had built a temporary one using leftover lumber. Not pretty, but sturdy. Lucy smiled when he wheeled her down it. He took that smile and locked it in his heart like armor. Then came the Saturday that changed everything. It was Community Cleanup Day, a monthly event where residents were encouraged to pitch in. Karen had been parading around with a laminated checklist and a garden cart full of tools, making notes and pointing at things that didn't meet her personal standard of aesthetic harmony. James wasn't scheduled to help. He'd planned a quiet morning with Lucy out front, sidewalk chalk and coffee. The air was warm, the kind of breeze that made the trees whisper. Lucy was mid-drawing, a pastel dragon curling around a cloud, her face soft with concentration. That's when Karen approached. Loud shoes on the pavement. That clicking sound that always preceded conflict. "You'll need to move her chalk and her chair," Karen barked, stopping at the base of their driveway. "It's obstructing the sidewalk." It's against policy. James looked up slowly from his coffee. She's 9, he said evenly. She's drawing dragons. And I'm vice president of the HOA. Karen snapped. Sidewalks are public property, no exceptions. James stood up, calmly, quietly. He didn't shout. He didn't posture. Karen, turn around and keep walking, he said. This is the last warning. But Karen didn't walk away. Instead, she marched forward, reaching down for Lucy's chair, grabbing the handle like it was a grocery cart. Karen, don't you dare. James took one step forward, but he was too late. Lucy, startled, reached to stop her sketchpad from falling. The wheel caught on the edge of the sidewalk. The whole chair lurched sideways. She tipped. Time slowed. The sound of Lucy crying out tore through James like shrapnel. Her elbow slammed the pavement. The chalk scattered. Her glasses flew off and cracked against the curb. James was there in a second, cradling her, checking her arm already swelling. Karen just stood there, pale now, the clipboard trembling in her hand. I didn't mean. But James wasn't listening. His voice was steady, cold. Go home, Karen. Right now. Neighbors had come out, eyes wide. A few whispered. One woman called out, should we call someone? I'll call someone. James said, you'll see who. He carried Lucy inside with practiced precision, like a soldier on instinct. He called the pediatrician first. Then Officer Miguel Torres, an old friend from the force who now worked the local beat. By the time the ER confirmed Lucy had a fractured elbow, Miguel was on James's porch. She touched the chair. Miguel asked, writing everything down. Grabbed it, James said, unprovoked. Ignored my warning. Miguel sighed. That's not just HOA business anymore. That's personal. Injury. And I know your daughter's status. The court will, too. James didn't say anything, but he looked at the clipboard Miguel held and said, that report. It's going to the city attorney. Right, ow. It's going higher than that, Miguel said. 8 violations, endangering a minor. She laid hands on your kid, James. The law doesn't care if she wears pearls and lives behind a picket fence. Karen thought it would blow over. She thought a few passive apologies to neighbors and a carefully worded statement to the HOA board would make it all disappear. But James wasn't interested in statements. He was preparing something else. Legal documents, video footage from a Ring camera to houses down, testimonies from neighbors who'd seen the whole thing. And at the center of it all, Lucy's cast. Bright pink, covered in drawings. And one sentence James wrote himself across the top in bold black marker. She broke it. Now she has to answer for it. By Monday morning, Westbrook Pines wasn't the same. What happened to Lucy had traveled faster than anyone expected. Word spread over morning dog walks, HOA Facebook threads, and whispered conversations at the community mailbox cluster. Some neighbors expressed quiet outrage. Others, those loyal to Karen or simply afraid of her, stayed silent. Karen, on the other hand, went on offense. She sent out a carefully crafted email to the HOA community. Unfortunately, a misunderstanding occurred during Saturday's community event involving a resident's child. I regret the situation and remain committed to making Westbrook Pines a safe, rule-abiding neighborhood for all. James read it 3 times. The language was clinical, no apology, no ownership, just spin. He forwarded it straight to his attorney, Miguel. The officer who had taken the initial report had already started compiling statements. A few neighbors had reached out to him directly, including Beth Lowry, the woman who'd witnessed Karen grab the wheelchair. She didn't trip. She was pulled, Beth had told Miguel. And Karen looked smug until she realized people were watching. Meanwhile, James kept his head down and focused on Lucy. Her fractured elbow had changed their routine. Her sleep was rough, her mood quieter. She didn't ask for chalk that week. Instead, she asked, "Am I not allowed outside anymore?" James's heart cracked. "You can go anywhere, baby," he said softly. "Anywhere you want. No one gets to tell you otherwise." That same day, a neighbor slipped an envelope into James's mailbox, no return address. Inside was a printed screenshot from the HOA's private Slack channel. Something James wasn't supposed to have access to. Karen had been ranting. The Maddox ramp was unapproved. If we let him get away with that, others will do whatever they want. We must maintain standards, even if some people try to weaponize sympathy. James didn't even flinch. He made copies. He added it to the folder growing on his dining room table, one tab at a time. Witnesses, emails, medical reports, ADA statutes, HOA bylaws, Slack screenshots. It was turning into something bigger than a personal grudge. This was becoming a pattern, and as the pieces came together, James found something buried in an old HOA meeting summary outline that froze him. Motion passed to grant VP Delacroix temporary discretion over minor structural issues until next board vote. Karen had used a loophole. She wasn't authorized to remove ramps, but she twisted that line, temporary discretion, as her license to control. And she hadn't stopped at James. He started knocking on doors. The Browns on Cottonwood Lane. Their fence request had been denied 5 times without explanation. Mrs. Gutierrez fined $100 for hanging wind chimes, even though the bylaws allowed seasonal decorative sound elements. And every story ended the same. Karen handled it. James wasn't the only one keeping receipts anymore. In fact, by Thursday night, he wasn't the one calling the shots. That was Deborah Collins, the actual president of the HOA. She showed up on James's porch with a folder of her own. "I've made a mistake," she said. "I let Karen run too far without oversight." James opened the folder and flipped through page after page of complaints. Most dismissed, many altered. Some had even been marked resolved without the homeowner knowing. She covered her tracks, Deborah admitted, but not well enough. James leaned against the doorframe. "Why now?" "Because it's not just about rules anymore," Deborah said. "It's about people. And that little girl of yours didn't deserve any of this." Then came the twist James hadn't seen coming. Deborah reached into her purse and handed him a USB stick. She ordered private security camera footage deleted from the community clubhouse servers. "We recovered it." James narrowed his eyes. "What's on it?" "Footage. Of your daughter. Of the ramp. Of her yelling that she had a right to remove it." James didn't smile, but something in his shoulders relaxed. The walls were closing in on Karen, and with the neighborhood waking up, it wasn't just James who wanted answers now. It was the entire board. And the court date. That was already on the calendar. It was a crisp Tuesday morning when the envelope arrived. Not a warning. Not a notice. Not another violation from the HOA. This one came straight from the courthouse. Karen Delacroix opened her mailbox like she did every morning, coffee in one hand, keys jingling in the other. She wasn't expecting anything serious, not yet. She thought her tight emails and staged statements would shield her, but the bold print on the envelope wiped the smirk off her face. Superior Court of Jefferson County. Civil action no. To 8 CV 712. She ripped it open right there on the sidewalk. She was being sued by James Maddox for personal injury to a minor, negligent conduct, and violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it wasn't just a lawsuit. Inside the summons was a list of attached evidence, medical reports from Jefferson General Hospital, to written witness statements, time-stamped HOA Slack messages with her own words, clubhouse security footage she had tried to delete. Karen's hand started shaking. She dropped her coffee. For the first time in years, the queen of the clipboard had no words. She slammed her mailbox shut and rushed back inside. Curtains shifted from a few houses nearby. Nobody waved. Meanwhile, across the neighborhood, James sat quietly at his dining table. Lucy sat nearby sketching with her non-injured arm, headphones in, humming along to a cartoon theme song. James had just gotten off the phone with his lawyer. The filing was official, but the court date wasn't the only fuse lit. That Thursday, the HOA board called an emergency meeting, not on Zoom, in person. Deborah Collins, the president, wasn't asking for permission anymore. She reserved the clubhouse, posted a community-wide flyer, and made one thing clear. Attendance was not mandatory, but it would be remembered. James showed up early, not to speak, just to sit in the second row, arms crossed, folders in his lap. Karen arrived late, sunglasses indoors, tight-lipped, her usual flair replaced by something twitchier. She didn't make eye contact with anyone. The clubhouse was packed. Dozens of homeowners, folding chairs filled, whispers bouncing across the room like wind in dry leaves. Deborah stepped up to the front. This meeting isn't about siding with one resident or another. She began. It's about accountability, ours, as a board, and individuals who represent this community. Then she dropped the first hammer. For the record, Vice President Karen Delacroix acted outside her authority when she ordered the removal of Mr. Maddox's accessibility ramp. She did not present the issue to the board. She did not seek approval. And as of this week, she is under formal legal investigation for actions that resulted in harm to a minor. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Karen stood up. "This is slander," she barked. "This is a personal vendetta against me." Deborah cut her off. "No, Karen. This is consequences." Karen turned, scanning the crowd for support. But there were no nods this time. No allies clutching their bylaws. Even Bob Sanders, the grumpy old man who once filed noise complaints against kids playing basketball, was staring at her like he didn't know her anymore. Then came the second blow. James stood, calm, quiet. "I didn't want this," he said. "I moved here for peace, for my daughter, for the sense of community people brag about when they visit a neighborhood like this." He paused. You could hear a pin drop. "I'm not suing because I want to check. I'm suing because my little girl was hurt on her own driveway by someone who thought rules were more important than dignity. And I don't think we should ever allow someone like that to make decisions for our families again." He sat down. No anger. No grandstanding. Just the facts. Karen was shaking. "I was trying to protect standards. You can't run a neighborhood on emotion. Then you shouldn't be near people." Someone shouted from the back. Deborah turned to Karen. "The board will vote on your suspension, effective immediately." Karen stared at her. "You're removing me?" "No," Deborah said. "You did that yourself." Karen stormed out. But her usual heels didn't echo the same way. They dragged this time every step heavier than the last. And in that quiet room, the Maddox family wasn't just seen, they were respected. But the real storm hadn't hit yet. Because the courtroom wasn't just going to expose Karen's actions. It was going to reveal her past. The legal machine was moving now, slow, deliberate, but relentless. James wasn't the kind of man to enjoy courtroom drama. But if that's where justice lived, he'd sit in the front row. His attorney, Rachel Lansing, had been digging deeper. She had a habit of flipping every stone twice, once for evidence, and once for leverage. What she found shocked even her. Karen Delacroix hadn't always lived in Westbrook Pines. Before moving to the quiet streets of Jefferson County, she'd Spent nearly 7 years in a gated subdivision outside Raleigh, North Carolina. It was called Sycamore Crest. Very upscale. Very rigid. Sounded familiar. And she had been on the HOA board there. Not just on it. President. Rachel found it through a cross-reference of legal documents Karen had filed herself, mostly roll enforcement cases and fines. But tucked between those records were 2 formal complaints, both from residents in Sycamore Crest. One involved a disabled veteran whose therapeutic garden had been bulldozed while he was in the hospital. The other was from a mother whose autistic son was denied an accessibility swing for their backyard. Both incidents had led to quiet settlements, nothing public. No media coverage. No admission of fault. Just 2 large checks and Karen's sudden resignation from the board. When Rachel presented the records to James, he just sat back in silence. This isn't the first time she's gone after people like Lucy, she said. It's a pattern. One she tries to bury every time. James didn't say a word. He just stared at the printed photos, the same smug expression in every board meeting snapshot. The same stiff posture behind podiums, except now. She wasn't standing on a pedestal. She was standing on a trapdoor. Rachel filed a motion to include Karen's past HOA conduct in the case. The defense objected, of course, claimed it was irrelevant. The judge didn't agree. Pattern of behavior, Judge Hathaway said. It stays in. Karen's attorney looked like he swallowed glass. But Karen, she just stared ahead, jaw tight, eyes hollow. Word spread fast after that. At the dog park, at the grocery store. Even in the elementary school, carpool line folks were talking. Not just about the case, but about Karen's history. About how she made people feel small. About how her rules always seemed to hurt the same kind of families, ones who needed compassion. More than control. And James, he stayed quiet. He wasn't out for revenge. He was waiting for justice to speak for itself. Then came the surprise nobody expected. A knock at James's door, just after dinner. He opened it to find a tall man in his 60s, white hair, worn denim jacket. Looked like a grandfather who spent more time with tools than technology. Name's Harold Jenkins. The man said, I flew in from Raleigh. James raised an eyebrow. You know her, Karen? Harold nodded slowly. Oh, I know her real well. I'm the vet whose garden she destroyed. He held out a battered folder full of photos before and after pictures. Raised beds torn up. A therapy koi pond filled with gravel. VA covered my meds. That garden covered my sanity. She said it. Violated the aesthetic plan. James invited him in. They talked for hours. Harold was angry. Not because of what happened to him, but because it was still happening to others. Thought I was the last. But now I see. She just moved zip codes. James added Harold's testimony to the list. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was a trail. A trail that led straight to the bench where Judge Hathaway would be sitting in 2 weeks. And as the court date approached, Karen began to crumble. She stopped going to the clubhouse. Stopped answering emails. Her lawn grew patchy. Her mailbox overflowed. And when she did show up, eyes hidden behind sunglasses. Shoulders hunched, nobody waved. Not even her old allies. She had spent years crafting the illusion of power. Now she was watching it collapse like cheap siding in a storm. And the storm was just getting started. The courtroom was quiet, not the kind of quiet that comes from silence, but the heavy kind, like everyone was holding their breath. James sat near the front, straight-backed, calm on the outside, though his pulse thudded like a drum under his collar. Rachel Lansing sat beside him, a stack of papers neatly ranged. Laptop open, but untouched. Karen sat at the opposite table, alone, except for her attorney. She looked different now, older somehow. Not a trace of her signature gloss. No clipboard. No smug grin. just a strained look that flickered between defiance and panic. Judge Hathaway entered, robes flowing like storm clouds. The courtroom stood, then sat again with a soft rustle. "This is the matter of James Maddox versus Karen Delacroix," he began, glancing at both sides. "Plaintiff alleges civil injury to a minor, negligence, and 8 violations. The court will hear opening statements." Rachel stood first. She didn't posture. She didn't grandstand. "Your Honor, we are not here over a simple accident. We are here because a child's basic right to safety and dignity was ignored by someone in power. Lucy Maddox, age 9, was physically harmed after her accessibility ramp was removed without notice, and her wheelchair was interfered with in a way that directly led to her injury. We have witnesses, we have messages, we have a pattern." Karen's attorney tried to keep things clinical. "This was an unfortunate misunderstanding, not malicious intent. Ms. Delacroix acted within her role on the HOA board. She regrets the outcome and believes this has been escalated unfairly. But intent wasn't the only thing on trial. The next are brought everything to the surface." Witnesses came forward. Beth Lowry with her clear recollection of the incident. Officer Miguel Torres with his photos, diagrams, and his own statement as a responding officer. Then came the footage. Projected on a screen was Karen, weeks earlier, standing at the clubhouse meeting. Her voice sharp, her tone proud. "If we make exceptions, people will exploit them. Standards are standards. I removed the ramp. It's not personal. It's community order." No one in the courtroom blinked. Judge Hathaway frowned slightly and scribbled something in his notes. Then Rachel did something unexpected. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, the minor wishes to make a statement." Karen's attorney objected immediately. "She's a child. She's the one who was hurt," Rachel replied. "She's articulate, prepared, and understands what she wants to say." The judge looked to James. "Is she ready?" James turned in his seat and gave a small nod toward the gallery. Lucy sat with her grandmother, dressed neatly, cast still on her arm. She nodded back. The bailiff wheeled her up carefully. Lucy looked small up there, tiny against the carved oak witness stand, but her voice was clear. "I don't like court," she began, her voice soft but steady. "But my dad said sometimes we have to talk when it's important." She glanced across the room at Karen. "No fear, just clarity. I draw a lot. I like dragons. I like flowers. And I liked going outside and drawing on the sidewalk until one day I couldn't. Someone took away my ramp and made me feel like I didn't belong." She paused. "My arm still hurts. I can't draw the same. But the thing that hurts more is that she didn't even say sorry." There wasn't a dry eye on the left side of the courtroom. Karen looked away. Lucy finished with, "I'm not broken. But what she did was wrong. That's all." She was wheeled back to her seat, and the judge called a short recess. James hugged her the moment they stepped outside the chamber doors. Karen didn't speak during the recess. She sat frozen, staring straight ahead, as though she'd seen her future and didn't like it. The trial was far from over, but the tone had changed. Not because of paperwork, not because of bylaws, because a 9-year-old girl had told the truth without anger, without bitterness, and the jury felt every word. Karen Delacroix had never looked so small. Day 4 of the trial brought no victory speeches, no spin, no control. The HOA was no longer a shield. Her clipboard was gone. Her titles meant nothing, and each passing hour made her grip on influence slip further through her fingers. Still, she had one move left, a desperate one. That morning, just before the court resumed, her attorney filed a motion request to dismiss based on administrative immunity. The idea was simple: claimed she was acting in her role as an HOA officer, following discretionary guidelines. In other words, she didn't mean to hurt Lucy. She was enforcing community rules. Rachel Lansing, James's attorney, skimmed the motion and didn't blink. They'd expected this, and they were ready. Inside the courtroom, Karen's lawyer stood and delivered his last real shot. Ms. Delacroix was operating within the boundaries of her assigned duties. While we regret the incident, we assert that her actions, while perhaps unwise, were not criminal, nor were they intended to inflict harm. Judge Hathaway leaned back, arms folded. Rachel stood calmly, her voice cool and measured. Let's be clear. Ms. Delacroix wasn't enforcing rules, she was creating her own. The board never approved the ramp's removal. The child was not a threat to any policy. What Ms. Delacroix did was outside any definition of administrative discretion. And worse, she did it quietly, without warning, and without compassion. She walked to the center of the courtroom and paused. Being on a board doesn't make you a monarch. It makes you accountable. And this child deserves better than being a casualty of one woman's obsession with control. She turned to the judge. We ask the court to proceed. Let the jury decide what Karen Delacroix really was doing. The judge nodded once. Motion denied. We go forward. Karen's shoulders dropped as if someone had added 20 pounds to her spine. The jury returned that afternoon. Rachel called one final witness, a man who hadn't even been in Jefferson County when the incident happened. Harold Jenkins, the retired veteran from Sycamore Crest, walked into the courtroom wearing a simple navy blazer, a service pin on the lapel, and a calm, steady walk that silenced the room. He spoke with deliberate ease. She took my garden, said it was too unstructured. I told her it was therapy. My VA counselor even wrote a letter. Didn't matter. 1 week later, I came home and it was gone. He held up a photo, a koi pond, now filled with dirt. I didn't fight it. I figured I was just one old man with bad dreams and no pull. But when I heard about this girl, when I heard what happened, I knew it wasn't just me. The courtroom hung on his words. Rachel handed the photo to the judge. Same pattern, different state, different family, same woman. Karen didn't look up. Her face had gone pale. Her attorney didn't even object. There was nothing left to defend. Back at the Maddox home that night, Lucy slept soundly for the first time in days. Her pain meds were working, and James had let her paint her cast with little purple dragons. One of them breathed glitter. James stepped outside onto the porch and sat on the top step. His temporary ramp, still solid, led to the sidewalk where Lucy's old chalk drawings had faded, but not disappeared. He thought about everything: the nights he wanted to scream, the mornings he had to smile for his daughter's sake. And now, they were almost there. One more day. Then the verdict. Then closure. Karen, meanwhile, didn't go home. She didn't return to Westbrook Pines that evening. She checked into a small hotel off the interstate under her maiden name. Word was, she had already called a realtor to quietly start listing her home. She thought she could outrun her consequences. But judgment wasn't done chasing her yet. The jury returned just after lunch. 12 men and women, faces tight with concentration, entered the courtroom with the stillness of a storm about to break. The gallery was packed. Neighbors, reporters, even a few HOA members who once voted with Karen now sat silently in the back row. James sat next to Rachel, one hand resting lightly on Lucy's chair. His daughter was there too, sitting quietly, cast painted with glittery dragons and tiny stars. She held a stuffed frog in her lap, but hadn't said a word since they entered the courtroom. Karen sat across from them, her shoulders rigid, her lawyer whispering something she clearly wasn't hearing. Her hands were clasped in her lap, white-knuckled. She hadn't looked up once. The bailiff took the paper from the jury foreman and passed it to Judge Hathaway. He read it quietly, then looked up, voice calm but firm. In the matter of Maddox versus Delacroix, we find the defendant, Karen Delacroix, liable. A gasp swept the courtroom like wind through dry leaves. The judge continued, liable for personal injury to a minor, negligence resulting in bodily harm, and willful violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Damages awarded $215,000 in compensatory and $350,000 in punitive. Karen didn't react not right away. She stared ahead, blinking slowly, like the words hadn't sunk in. But the silence around her did. The HOA president, Deborah Collins, lowered her eyes. Even her former allies sat frozen, like passengers watching a ship sink they once helped steer. Karen's attorney leaned in, whispering rapidly. She shook her head once, then again. No appeal, she muttered. James didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just placed his hand gently over Lucy's and gave it a light squeeze. The judge concluded the hearing with final orders. Karen was formally barred from participating in any HOA activity or administrative board in the county for 5 years. Any further attempt to influence local governance would be treated as civil contempt. Outside the courtroom, cameras waited. James refused interviews. He wheeled Lucy quietly to the car, shielded her from the questions, and drove home through the streets of Westbrook Pines, where windows peeked open and neighbors stood with quiet nods. When he got home, Lucy finally broke her silence. Can we go outside again now? James turned in the driver's seat and looked her in the eyes. You can go anywhere, kiddo. You always could. That weekend, he built her a new ramp, this time in steel and cedar. Beautiful, strong, and permanent. The neighborhood HOA board sent formal approval. No more surprise removals. No more secret votes. But the final twist came on a Sunday morning, 2 weeks later. A small manila envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a short note. Mr. Maddox, I've sold my home and moved out of Westbrook Pines. You won. I still think I was right. But I'm tired of fighting. I hope your daughter heals well. KD. James folded the note without a word and tucked it into the bottom drawer of his desk. Not for memory. For closure. The HOA underwent changes that year. Deborah Collins stepped down and was replaced by a neighbor named Calvin, who ran on one promise: transparency, not tyranny. People showed up to meetings again. Fewer complaints were filed, and families stopped fearing the rules that were supposed to protect them. As for Lucy, she healed. She painted. And when spring arrived, she chalked a giant mural down the sidewalk, her wheelchair parked proudly beside it. A castle, a unicorn, and a giant red dragon perched on the roof with a banner that read, Safe, Strong, Home, James. Watched from the porch, coffee in hand, and for the first time in months, let out a full breath. The fight was over. Karen had no escape left. But his daughter, she had the whole world.